Hello, everyone. So, as we know, the protests are now on the fourth day and probably going over to the weekend and probably into next week too, when schools and colleges and stuff are back next week. And, I thought the government, might say, look, we probably should give them something because, again, they're giving pretty much breadcrumbs. They're not looking for, like, the lotto, basically. They're only looking for a few breadcrumbs off the rich man's table. The politicians, of course, they're getting well looked after. They don't have to worry about paying for anything. And basically, the politician said, fuck you. And basically threatened to bring the army out to shut them up and to put them back into their box and say, be quiet. That's pretty much what they wanted. And that was a great negotiation start to say, let's deploy the army to shut people up and to shut people down, basically, to shut up people to make them afraid to speak out. And now we see today, there was supposed to be negotiations to try and end this protest. And leaders of the protest went to the Department of Agriculture, along with the unions, the Farming Union and the Hauliers Union, etc. They went to the Department of Agriculture today to meet with government ministers, the Taoiseach, the Taoiseach, I take too. And the protest leaders wouldn't let in. So you think they would have said, yeah, we should let the protest leaders in, because it probably would be solved in an hour, like if they generally wanted to try the government. But they said, no, fuck you, basically. Go back, we're not going to negotiate with you. We're going to negotiate with the unions. But this is the thing, the unions are no good because the unions would just agree whatever the government says. If the government said, here's a pile of shit, they'll just say, that's great, we give it to the farmers. Because, let's be fair, the unions are just too afraid of the government. Because, again, the government gives them money, the unions and stuff like that. So they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. And, of course, the majority of farmers there are sick and tired of the IFA, etc. And I know farmers myself. They're sick and tired of the IFA because they're too weak. And a lot of farmers have said that the crying, the IFA are saying, oh, the farmers need more support and stuff with this carbon tax and stuff. But the government don't listen. They're not strong enough when it comes to these. They only basically ask the government. They don't tell them to do anything. And they're weak, and basically they will just capitulate to the forced opportunity, the IFA, etc. Because they're not much additional, because the people that are there are not willing to really fight much with the government and not really to put up much of an argument. So it would have been better for everybody, for the whole country, if they would have let them four people in today, the protest leaders, just for an hour. I'm not saying to have them there all day and listen to them all day, but even just for an hour, just to talk to the ministers and stuff. Because I say they would have probably got it solved if the government wasn't so stubborn and wanted to deploy the army. But again, this is the problem. The problem is that the majority of these people are Irish people, and of course the Irish government hate Irish people. They despise Irish people. But particularly they hate farmers and stuff. They hate anything to do with rural Ireland. They hate anything to do with Ireland itself. They don't want it back what's looking at your sovereignty, as Micheál Martin famously said. But yeah, it's the government's own doing. It's the government's own fault. And it's unfortunate. And again, I'm not sitting here and saying, oh yeah, the whole country's chock blocked and nobody can move anywhere. I'm not sitting here and saying that, but it's necessary, unfortunately, to get the government to listen, because for weeks they've been asking the government, please do something, for the last few weeks, and the government basically sat there and done nothing. And sat in their hands and said nothing. And while we went off for St. Patrick's Day, they went all around the world. And they didn't care about the people at home. But this is the thing, they have to care now. They've been kind of forced to care. And the thing about bringing in the army and stuff, that's all well and good, but there's more protesters than there are the army. And the army only has 4 tow trucks, big tow trucks, to move the trucks. And not even that too. For every truck to take away, there's going to be about another 10 to replace it. So they're not going to win, and there's far too many people. And they can't throw everybody in prison. And as simple as that. And the government knows this. And again, they've kind of lost the room. Whatever about before, the last few days, people were like, oh, this is terrible. So some people were like, oh, it's terrible that the farmers are blocking the motorways, etc. People can't get to hospital appointments, etc. But this is the thing, they completely took it to another level when they talked about bringing in the army to deal with the protests. They completely kind of kicked the ball out of the park, if that makes any sense. Because that kind of, like, that's a big escalation. Well, straight away the government were like, let's bring in the army, shut them down, send in the guns. The boy would shoot them, let's be fair, the boy would if they got away with the government. Because they take nothing of Irish people, they generally take nothing of them, they think of them as scum. That's the way the Irish government think of us, and that we're basically just there to be used. The only time they ever really care is when the election comes up, they pretend they care. But after that, I see none of my politicians looking after me, or any Irish person. I see them up in the door looking after themselves, the bondholders, the bankers. They're the only people that's getting looked after. The people that are coming in from Timbuktu getting 5-star hotels. They're the only people I see getting looked after them. And there's many Irish people that are struggling, and the government doesn't want to know a thing about it. And they don't care to know. That's as simple as that. They just don't care to know. They couldn't give a damn. So I wouldn't blame. I don't blame the truck drivers, the hauliers, because they're getting it tough too. They're having a tough time. The same as the majority of people too. And there's a lot of support for it across the country. We see protests in Cavan today over too at the junction, the Dublin roundabout as we were calling in Cavan. And rightly so. And hopefully they stay down to the government, does something. Because again they're not looking for the lotto. They're looking just for cut a few bob off the taxes, cut a few bob of the taxes, maybe get rid of the carbon tax altogether, maybe even just that, or even just do something. The moment in the time the government just like, fucking no, we're not going to do anything. And that's the simple stuff. We're going to send in the army to shut these people up, and send them back to the farms and tell them to be quiet. You won't nothing to be happy about it. But that's pretty much the government's negotiation position, what they have in the last few days. And of course it went down well, just to say, across the country. It's caused more people to come out and more hatred of the government. So it kind of worked out very well for them, because people are entrenched than ever before. So good luck to the government. They probably will need it, because it's going to be all weekend, probably all next week with the schools going back. And again, the government could have ended this the first night if they would have said, yeah, let's have a sit down, let's discuss this. I say they would have. Within the first few hours of the protest, 4 hours I would say, if they had to sit down with the protest, with the leaders of the protest, and maybe the unions too along with them, and just sat down for 4 or 5 hours and had a discussion about what they could do, the protest would have been finished that first day. But the government decided to be stubborn and talk about sending in the army. That's what happened, and that's what caused this. And it's caused more people, it's caused more anger and upset than anything. And again, it's the government's own fault, because the government should have done this before even the protest even happened. They should have done more to help. Because it's not like they don't have enough money. They're awakening the money in the carbon tax. They're literally sucking up money. They're literally sucking money like there's no tomorrow. And they have so much money in taxes, etc. They're well able to do it. There's other countries in Europe that don't have the money to help out the people, and I understand that they don't have the money. But it's a different kettle of fish here. They have the money. They could even cut back on the politicians' paychecks if they need to, or cut back on their allowances, expenses, or cut back on Micheál Martin travelling around the world. The good thing about it is we save money by not having Micheál Martin fly off to Canada. There's money saved there by the taxpayer because of this bullshit, but because of this lunatic driving around half the country. What I mean by that is going flying around. A few weeks ago he was in Helsinki, now he was in Warsaw, then he was here, there and everywhere. But we're saving money by having that lunatic at home. In other words, too bad they wouldn't keep him in Canada. If we send them on a one-way flight, then that'd be good enough for us. But yeah, I would say to the government, please let the protesters in, at least the protester leaders, and have a discussion. They're not asking you to fucking go down and kiss their feet. To be generally honest, you think the government would ask, you think they were asking the government would give them their life saying, the politicians' life savings. But no, they're not. They're asking for very simple stuff, and the government have overreacted, saying about the army and stuff. We're going to send in the army. But yeah, that went down. It went down very well. Look at the newspapers and the media abroad. It's gone down very well. The Irish government are sending in the army to shut people up and to disperse all these protests, these faraway protesters, these old men and women wanting to protect their farms and land. Oh, we couldn't have that. And to talking about why having Irish flags to are extremists, dangerous people. We have to put a stop to them. But thankfully, I don't know what the majority of Irish soldiers listen to the orders that they've been given to basically go and hit their own people. I don't think the majority of soldiers are willing to do that for the government that hates them, because they know themselves that the government hates them. So yeah, let me know what you think. Subscribe for more and bye.